Hi, and welcome back for Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'll be your host this evening. I'm Jim Nettles. And so before we get started, we're going to go around the room and let everybody introduce themselves. So, Michael, we're going to let you go first since you're up and this is your first time, not to mention the fact the last name starts with A.
I do like alphabetical order. It works in my advantage. So I'm Michael J. Allen, Star-Lord and author of science fiction and fantasy, pretty much all the way in between.
Kate.
Hi, I'm Kait Ballanger, and I write paranormal romance, mostly wolf shifters, and right now it's wolf shifters meets cowboys.
All right, I'll save the bad jokes for later. Sammi.
I'm Sammi Cee. I write gay romance. I write contemporary and paranormal. Right now I'm writing MPreg, and I have shifters who are strippers.
Ooh.
Well, and I've got the cowboy, so we can all get together.
Yeah. Party time.
It's gonna be a party. Jacki.
I'm Jacki James. I write romance. A mix of contemporary paranormal. Right now I'm writing daddies.
And Shane.
I'm Shane K. Morton. I write all over the place at this point in time. I write mainly romance, LGBT fiction, YA, contemporary, paranormal, and impreg. 2021 was my year to say no to nothing. So I'm trying anything and everything that I decide I want to write. So.
Well, let's get started. Let's just sort of break into a little bit about the new releases. So Michael, we'll start with you. I know you've got a couple of new releases coming out. So let's pick one and start with it. Let's tell a little bit about it.
Okay, so the most pertinent new release is the one in the middle, and that is the anthology for Starflight. Starflight Tales from the Starflight Lounge is a series of stories expanding the universe of the old 1986 Electronic Arts game by the same title. And as somebody who, as a teenager, spent all of their hours just grinding through the open sandbox and expanding my ship and collecting stuff and blowing up aliens, it was absolutely awesome to suddenly be part of not only being in the universe and writing the universe, but actually solving questions that I could never get answered.
So Kate, what you got coming?
So my latest just came out 1 week ago exactly, and that is Fierce Cowboy Wolf. So this is the fourth book in my 7 Range Shifter series, and that's the series that is Wolf Shifters meets Cowboys. And so each book in the series kind of stands alone, but there's been a lot of build-up, I think, in the earlier books. I think you get something out of reading them in order to this particular one, because this hero is the Pack Master. So romance trope-wise, it is enemies to lovers, marriage of convenience trope, and he's paired with a really feisty she-wolf warrior. So it's a lot of fun.
What about you, Sammi?
My latest release was on Saturday. It's my first MPreg, the first in the series, and it was called Tango. It's a lot of fun. I have stripper omegas and the growly alphas who are going to try to tame them, I guess. Kinda. Sorta.
Sorta, maybe.
Maybe.
What about you, Jacki?
My most recent one came out last week. It was called Rider. It was the first in a series called Blue Collar Daddies. And it is an contemporary romance, and it was adorable. And I don't say that a lot about my books. That thing was adorable. It was so much fun to write. I had a really good time with that one. And it's the first in a series of 4. And I'm really, really excited to launch that series. It was a lot of fun.
And Shane, what's your latest?
So in I think 10 days, I have a book coming out in the 10 Star Witches series, Beyond Ruby Gulch, which is Cowboy Witches, paranormal. I have an empath / psychic that has to go home, where he was pretty much thrown out of his hometown to solve a series of murders that's happening. And of course, he runs across his the boy he ran out on, and they fall back in love because it is a second chance romance trope with a lot of action and a lot of grisly murder. Actually, it's kind of fun, but it's all cowboys meets witches, so it was an exciting thing for me to write. And then right after that, I have my Valleywood book coming out, which is Valleywood is a spinoff of Bell Valley, and it is my first impreg book, Sammy. And that will be releasing, I think, in 4 weeks, the end of August, beginning of September, I think. I should have had these dates ready. You can tell that I'm really prepared today. I won't use it now. I'm holding it.
So Kait, let's talk a little bit about what got you into writing this particular series, and because you're talking about the fact that this has been a lot of buildup for you on this one. So kind of what drove you to write this particular Shifter series, and what brought you to get to this point in the arc?
Yeah, so I think when you think about a lot of Shifter romances in the paranormal genre, a lot of the time, at the time that I was starting the series anyway, obviously there's more paranormal, like Western crossover now, which is great. I love that. But at the time, it seemed like there was a lot of Shifter stories that were set in like these big city settings. And I was hoping to do something just slightly different. So I kind of started with the world building question of, well, if wolf shifters were real, where would they live, right? And how would they survive? And so I ultimately kind of came to the answer that they would live out near Yellowstone, where real wolves live, right? In their natural habitat. And so thinking about that sort of landscape and Montana as a setting, it became a question of, well, you know, how do they survive? And then I settled on the idea that they sort of make their livelihoods living in plain sight of humanity as ranchers. So that's where the ranchers, cowboys by day, and wolf shifters by night came from. So they could be near their native lands to serve that wolf shifter side of their nature, but also, you know, living in a place where they could kind of coincide with humanity, though humanity does not know they exist in the series. So that was where the sort of concept came from. And from the very beginning of the first book in the series, you know, we get sight of this pack master of this group of wolf shifters called the Grey Wolves. And the Grey Wolf Packmaster plays a big role in book one because he's the one, of course, saying no to everything the hero in book one wants to do. So he's been kind of like a naysayer of what the earlier book heroes have been trying to do, and like kind of the goalpost stopping them from going off the rails when they've got crazy hero plans and quests they need to go on. So there's been a lot of buildup of this particular character, Maverick, who's the hero of Fierce Cowboy Wolf, because he's the alpha and because he's kind of been standing in the way of the other characters in the series. So I think a lot of my readers have been looking forward to seeing him kind of being taken down a peg. So so I had a lot of fun with his character, and also playing with the idea of, if he's Packmaster and nobody can say no to him because he's in charge, you know, how do you deal with this sort of heavy hangs the crown sort of thing?
What about you, Sammy? What brought you to write this one, since it's the first time you're taking a shot at it?
So I had a dream about the stripper series, their storylines, who they would be, and I wanted them to be different. And several people said all technically at the same time, you love MPreg. Do it up. Why don't you just mix it all up and make it into something really fun? And it's so much fun. I'm having so much fun. So I was excited to write strippers anyway. I had a lot of, we all have a past, right? And mine was fun. And so I was excited. I was like, this will be fun to, I think the storylines I had for each book, each character, I was really excited about. And, they've evolved from even there. And who would have known I love writing the dance scenes? Like, I love it. Like, I have so much fun. So it's been fun.
What about you, Jackie?
Well, this is not my first daddy book. I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with them. I kind of love them. So I've written a few, just a little bit. But I'm also a little obsessed with TikTok. Not being on it, like you're not going to see me on there probably, but I love to watch videos. Love it. And I saw this video, and it was this guy, and he was talking to all of the ladies out there. And I had already decided I wasn't going to write any more daddy books. I made that decision. And I'm watching this TikTok, and he's talking about how ladies are missing an opportunity to pick up men at the hardware store. That if they would go to the hardware store and pretend they don't know what's going on, these big burly men who hang out in hardware stores would help them solve their problems, right? And how they could go from man to man in the hardware store and get all these numbers. And for some reason, that just clicked to me that was like the perfect daddy story, right? You've got some poor guy in the hardware store who has no idea what he's doing, who just has an epic meltdown in the hardware store because he thinks he ought to know, but he doesn't know. And in swoops this daddy to just save the day and fix all of his problems, which of course turns into fixing all of his problems, because that's what daddies do in my books. So anyway, from there, the next thing I know, I'm not going to write any more daddy books turns into a 4-book Blue Collar Daddy series. So that's where that came from.
What about you, Shane?
Well, first off, Jackie, I want to thank you for writing my autobiography.
So welcome.
Someone did need to do that for me eventually, so that's how I used to get all my dates. So Elizabeth Silver created 10 Star Witches and reached out to me if I wanted to be a part of the new season, which is the second season of the series that she helped create, that she created. And I thought magic cowboy witches. That's a hard yes. I really want to do that because it sounds like nothing I've ever written before. And I really had just written a paranormal short story that was a part of something for a charity anthology recently. And I really enjoyed writing magic. And I'm a giant geek, so superheroes are my jam, right? Like, I know everything about every superhero ever created in like 4 different comic platforms. Like I'm like an encyclopedia. So doing magic felt like kind of going back to those roots, even though they weren't superheroes, they were kind of superheroes to me in a way. I could kind of treat them that way. So I said yes, and I actually the book kept getting longer and longer because I kept creating all of these fabulous battles and epic adventures for them to go on during the course of the book, because it was just like a comic book that wouldn't end for me. And it was brilliant. And I'm going to write a lot more magic books at some point in time if I can figure that out. And it's the same thing for Valleywood. Gia Reeves asked if I would be interested in doing it. And I had never even thought that I would want to write Impreg. Just never, it was one of those things I'm like, yeah, it's probably not something I'm going to write. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, why am I even thinking of saying no at the opportunity to work with all these great authors and to do something completely brand new? so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And it's actually been a blast. And I am sure it will not be my last, because I've had such a fun time kind of exploring that world and the science that goes with it. Like, that's kind of been the most fun for me. And it has a lot of shifters in it. And it's also my first shifter book too. So like I said, 2021, at the beginning of the year, I said, I'm not going to say no to opportunities and to trying new things. And it really has been that kind of year for me. I'm writing outside my normal genres all the time. So, and enjoying it.
What about you, Michael?
2022 will go back to my normal genre.
No. Once you've broken out, you're. What about you, Michael? Because you've got the anthology, and I know we talked about a couple of others.
We did, but actually, based on everybody else, I'm actually going to shift, if you'll choose the pun, back to what comes before Starflight, and that was the final book in my Phoenix Shifters Blood Phoenix series.
Shifters.
So this one was absolutely awesome, and it came from, because we're talking about how we started, right? It came from the original concept of, what if there was a phoenix of water instead of fire? And what would that be? And what essence would they be reborn from? And how would you tell a story about a phoenix that's reborn? And of course, the great thing about the whole series was that I got to kill off my main characters on a regular basis. That was fun. They would come back as some random human DNA variant, different gender, different nationality. They had to deal with, fingerprinting and the DMV, and the fact that the nosy old landlady wants to know why there's a man living in the apartment that's rented by a woman. And then, of course, relationships, because, the main character of the series, is already dating someone when we start the series. She dies at one point. She comes back male, I think, on the second death. And we have to deal with all of that. And that's just the interpersonal stuff. That doesn't even deal with the fact that the fairies are trying to steal creation. I mean, it was a whole bunch of what if. And of course, on top of that, just to put a cherry on the sundae, I've got a junior coroner who discovers that if he takes troll blood from dead fairies, he can reanimate bodies. So, and he can use those bodies as his own version of superheroes to go protect people, which, troll blood reanimated alley cats don't necessarily always agree.
That sounds fabulous, Michael.
Yeah.
How many books are in that series?
So this one is number 5, and that is it.
That is it.
Sorry. There's a camera here somewhere.
What's the name of that series?
This is the Blood Phoenix Chronicles.
Now I know what I'll be doing over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down right now.
Me too.
Yep. Water, blood, air phoenix, fire, of course, and then earth.
That is a cool concept.
And their job is to protect us from ourselves, because the fairies are all too happy to trade souls for wishes.
So since we've got a lot of both wrapping up and as well as a lot of new experimentation, let's talk about some of the fun stuff that went in the creative process. So Sammi, since this is your first experimentation with Impreg, what was the big surprise that came out at you in doing research or doing the writing? What was the one thing that popped out at you that you looked at and you said, well, I'd have never gone that way before?
For me, it's always the writing. I had 15 different outlines. I was like, oh, I'll just kind of go with it. The first couple all match, so I'll be okay. And of course, I started writing and went, okay, well, that wasn't supposed to happen until like book 3, so let's go with it. And so I did. And Jacki James and I today, after another author and I last night, and yeah, I've had to rearrange the whole series because of what happened in book 1, which means it will happen again, probably by the time I'm done with book 2.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
What about you,
So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sammy. I'm
no,
sorry.
I was just gonna say I keep an outline just so that I know when I'm moving and when I'm shifting. It gives me a clear path.
It's kind of like a map for D&D players, right? You draw the map and then they go off of it.
Yes. And if I don't have the map I get very confused. So as long as I have that map to know, okay, I just took a hard left, I'm good.
Yeah, well, that's what outlines are for. You know, they're not designed to survive contact with actually writing. What about you, Jackie?
I don't know. Like I said, this was not my first daddy book. So I think the big surprise for me in this one was how much I had missed writing them. Like, because I really thought I was done with them. Somebody on this panel named Sammy kept telling me I wasn't.
Listen to Sammy.
But I swore I always do. In the end, it might take me a little while to get there, but I always listen to her before it's all said and done. But I was surprised how much I enjoyed writing that again, like being back in that kind of a dynamic. I really, really loved it. I also, so the first few of my books, I was a complete pantser, just straight up complete pantser. And I started doing outlines. And then for some reason, a couple of books ago, I decided I wasn't going to do outlines anymore. And she's shaking her head. I was quite surprised about the fact that, I don't know how I wrote those other books without a plan. Like, I don't know how I did that. And so there were numerous phone calls of, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening next. What am I supposed to do? And so this is my last attempt at ever pantsing a book ever again. I'm not doing it. So that was probably my only surprise.
Does anybody want to make bets about there only being 4? Anybody?
There's going to be a lot more.
Let me go start the odd. Let me go start the taking the odds down.
The odds. Well, every time I do like an author takeover or whatever, since I released this book, I'm like, so this is a blue collar daddy series, and all the daddy's jobs are just as different as the daddies are. So what kind of blue collar job would you like to see a daddy have? And then there'll be all these answers. And I'm like, oh, that would be a good book. Oh, that would be a good book. So it might not only be 4. We'll see.
There's a lot of aisles to the hardware store. I mean, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Having grown up in a hardware store, there's a lot of aisles. Shane, come on now. Since this is the year of saying yes, you've got to have had some fun stuff and a couple of surprises pop up in all the stuff you've been cranking out.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a planner. I am a major planner in most of my life, but when it comes to writing, I actually kind of like just going with an idea and seeing where it takes me. And then after chapter 3, I start plotting like crazy. So I'm kind of like a mix of all of that. I think that what I discovered about myself and what about writing for me during this year, because I really have, I wrote my first cozy books. I wrote 3 gay cozies with drag queen detectives that all released this year. My first magic short story, my Cowboy Witches, and now Impreg. I think that what I discovered is that I don't like being pigeonholed, and I don't really like saying that this is who I am, because I'm ever shifting and ever changing, right? Like who knows? I might write a Harlequin romance with a woman in it next year. I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, that's the great thing about writing. I mean, pretty much I write all LGBT books, but my genres are wide and varied. I've written horror. I've written a little bit of sci-fi, kind of all over the place, Hallmarkish romance. But I think that what I've discovered about myself is that I like forcing myself out of my comfort level and doing something new. And it takes, great writer friends who see something in you sometimes that, you know, do this with me kind of thing, so that it kind of gets you out of that comfort zone and shakes you up a little bit and makes you look at what it is you can do and what you want to do. So I think for me, it's been about stepping outside my typical comfort zones and realizing that I have a further fucking reach than I did before I knew it. You know,
Okay, you get a style point for that one. So, Michael, what about you? What did you learn? What really kind of surprised you?
Oh, well, first I want to go back to what everybody else was saying. So I guess I would describe it as a Frozone style discovery writer. So I started a point and I'm aiming for a point, but about halfway through I start throwing little ice skids in front of me to kind of guide me the way I'm going to end up going. So a little bit of discovery, or a lot of discovery, and a little bit of structure, a little bit of architecture. For the Blood Phoenix series specifically, I learned how to close a series, and it's not easy. I built so much into that world that closing it down was actually frightening. It was almost a writer's block moment when I'm getting toward the end, going, how do I make sure it's all here? How do I make sure I tie it all together? And particularly when you take into account that for the most part, I'm only a discovery writer with architect tendencies, not an actual full outliner. It was a major challenge. It was a major challenge. And of course, you know, I finished up Blood Phoenix. I was also working on the sequel to my, you know, 19th century alternate history epic fantasy, which starts in the Wild West, but I was doing it in 19th century China. And now I'm digging and buying all these books with tiny print about, you know, opium wars and everything else. And I need more structure, but I can't seem to stand it.
What about you, Kate?
So I'm Trad Pub. So I wrote this book over a year ago at this point. So thinking back to like what surprised me about it, I was like, oh gosh, this is hard. I've written so many books since then. But I would say, you know, there wasn't a ton of surprises because this is the fourth book in a series. So I kind of already had a feel for some of the world building and, you know, and how things were going to go. But I really drilled down into like the origin stories of the characters in this particular book in Fierce Cowboy Wolf. So that was kind of a surprise for me because as far as everybody's saying, like I'm a discovery writer or plotter, I'm somewhere in between. You know, I typically know like the major beats of the book, the beginning and the end, like in some of the spots in between, like when I start to write, but how I get there can be anything. And it typically, you know, goes in a way I didn't necessarily expect it to. So I'm kind of in between on that. But so I think the origin story and how much of that was already seeded in the previous books, even though I wasn't really like conscious of the fact that I was doing that, was kind of a surprise to me. And also I didn't know who the villain of this story was until I wrote the ending and it was revealed who the villain was. So that was certainly a surprise as well.
Well, that's part of the fun of being a discovery writer, though. You get to read the story as it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's dive a little bit into the characters of these stories, because I mean that's what we all really want to know. Is we want to see the character. We want to know what you get thrown at, how they react. So I always love the villains more than the hero anyway. So Jackie, what about in your series? What do we need to know about the antagonist? Who's our challenge?
Well, I mean, really, the challenge in this one is not an outside individual. The challenge in this one is that I have a guy who has never been involved in a daddy boy relationship before, who finds himself absolutely crazy about a guy who is a daddy. And the challenge is him figuring out how that works and if that's really something that he thinks he wants and if that's a lifestyle he thinks he can live, and the two of them working all of that out as far as how that's going to work for the two of them. That was really the overall story in that one. I don't really have a bad guy in that one.
Sometimes the internal struggle is the hardest. What about you, Shane?
My antagonist is a bodiless wraith that is an old god that was trapped inside a mountain. The Native Americans called him Wigdignu, and he has found a human to possess and grow strength in so that he can start to realize his form once again and rain destruction and chaos upon the earth. And he feeds on fear, so he's like a fear vampire. And he is leaving a trail of bodies all over Hardin Falls, Wyoming. My main character is an empath psychic that actually believes his only real power is collecting and absorbing the fears of others and then being able to release them back out into the world in visions. But he soon realizes, of course, that he's more than that, but not before Wigdignu decides he's a very tasty snack as he wants to absorb all of the fear that he possesses. So it's a pleasant, fun, happy novel.
Cheerful. Nothing but love. What about you, Michael?
Well, for Blood Phoenix, the antagonists are so overlapped that it would be hard to go into it. So I'm going to shift over to Guns of Underhill, which we were talking about cowboys earlier. Oops, there, good. Now, the cool thing about the sequel, book 2, is that we get to introduce another of the old ones. To give you a little bit of background, the concept of the world is, what if the Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse gods were all just fairies screwing with us, and we figured it out? So in book 2, a new old one is introduced who plucks one of the heroes out of book 1, drags them over to 19th century China because they want vengeance against humanity for stealing their godhood. They want the old world back. They want Spain back. They want England back. And for the first time in history, they're actually working together. I mean, fairies, right? Big, powerful, nasty fairies, all of a sudden are cooperating instead of, playing pranks on each other and just ruining people's lives. And the poor protagonist for this one, he's not the big mighty hero from the first book. He doesn't have all the magical powers, and he doesn't have all the special abilities. He's really pretty much just a railroad foreman that is stuck under the thumb of Lan Xianzi, who is one of the original dragon gods of China, or at least that's the role she was playing to get her way. And of course, since she's not getting her way, she's throwing a tantrum.
What about you, Kate?
So I don't want to reveal exactly who the villain of Fierce Cowboy Wolf is, because that would be a spoiler. But I will say, so Maverick Gray is the hero, and he is the packmaster of the Grey Wolves, and it's established in the earlier parts of the series that they're the largest sort of contiguous wolf pack in the United States. And so he has a lot of enemies. And his heroine, Sierra, is soon to be the first female elite warrior among the pack. So being a sort of, path-paving feminist female, she also has a lot of enemies. And at the opening of the book, we find out that somebody is out to kill Maverick. We don't know who it is. We don't know why they're doing this, but there's a suspicion that it's somebody from within the pack, even though some of their outside enemies are also coming for them at the same time. So part of the plot is kind of them trying to figure out who is out for the Packmaster's life in this book.
What about you, Sammy?
I'm gonna have to go with Jacki James on this one. My Omega, he's got some internal struggles going on. His past is telling him that he needs to, walk the road alone. And he has a couple things happen that show him he really doesn't need to walk it alone. So that's really himself. He's got some work to do on the inside.
So let's just sort of talk a little bit about, because the one great thing here is everybody has been prolific in the year that has not been. So for writers, for prospective writers, or even just for the readers, let's talk a little bit about how you guys managed to keep everything going with everything else going on. So Shane, what about you? I mean, obviously saying yes to everything was... So
I only get one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should have saved it for this. So I have had a job in the same place for almost 20 years. I am a union employee in the performing arts and love it very much, and will stay in that job until I retire because I have a pension and a 401k. Darn it. So it has been a year all the way around for me in a lot of ways. I mean, in my 9-to-5 life, everything kind of got shut down, and I was still working and trying to figure everything out, on top of also working another 40-hour work week, writing all the time, because I was sitting at home, like everyone else. I was sitting at home. The husband gave me a wide berth in terms of what I wanted to do, because I really, in 2020, I really wanted to be able to put out a book a month, which I did, or I was able to accomplish that. And it changed a lot for me in being able to do that as a writer. And then 2021, I did slow down a little bit because I was kind of back at work more. But I think what the kind of balance for that for me was the trying of new things. I mean, I really think that I discovered a niche that I really love in my cozy mystery series. It's something that I'm going to be continuing and spinning off. And then who knows, maybe spinning off again, because I enjoy it so much. I have no idea, but I am spinning off my Drag Queen Detective series into a Drag Queen PI series this fall, with a character that is beloved in 2 of those 3 books, named Ursula Moulet, who will be getting her own series on top of Vicky Dean in Drag Queen Detective. And I think that what kind of balanced it for me was just honestly trying new things, but finding something that really brought me joy in writing. And that did. Writing drag queens actually is something that I adore and love, because it was a part of my old life. It's been a part of my life since I was 18 years old in some ways. So kind of being able to bring that out was kind of the balance, I think, that I found in 2022 or 2021 in terms of my writing so far. So it has allowed me to feel comfortable trying new things, I guess. Was that the question?
Sure. What about you, Michael?
Well, I totally failed. I got dragged off to Neverland by the pirates. The day job decided to invade the house and use the only computer that I used for writing. It also demanded a double workload in 60 to 70 hour weeks. So for most of my Neverland year, I actually didn't get very much done. It was harsh and it was horrible. And it took me a trip around the country and then setting up this new office to finally isolate a creative bubble. And even then, it also took some arguing, because I didn't want to lose my 401k either, with the fact that trying to convince the corporation that they couldn't literally have me reacting to things 24/7, even though they were demanding it. Beginning of this year, though, I got the sequel for Guns of Underhill written. I got the new SF Lit RPG done. At the got the last of the Blood Phoenixes out, plus a bunch of anthology work. So I mean, this year has been good. This year has been good. I'm not quite up to the speed I want to be, but I'm going to get there.
What about you, Kate?
So I was, I guess, sort of lucky, at least somewhat in the year that shall not be named, because I already work mainly from home. So I write, obviously, and then I also teach online at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm a creative writing professor. So my two jobs kind of tie in together. And then on top of that, I also take care of my kids. I'm a homemaker, so I've got a 6-year-old son and a 2-year-old son. So that was probably the biggest challenge, is once we decided that my oldest was not going to go to school for the year, we were going to homeschool, and I was suddenly going to go from teaching college students to teaching a kindergartner. That was a big challenge, but there was a period for a few months where my husband was actually furloughed, and so he was out of work, and I suddenly had someone to care for my kids, way more than I was used to. So hubby would take the kids, and I would go to my office, and at the time, I was the sole income, which is not something I was used to. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to do extra writing because of that. And I was already contracted for Fierce Cowboy Wolf and Wild Cowboy Wolf, which is my next book that comes out this November, because with trad publishing, things are usually about a year out. So I was already contracted for those things, and I knew I had to meet those deadlines. But since I had all that extra time on my hands to suddenly write in a way that I don't normally have, I was able to do a whole ton of other sort of projects and get those out. And it was both a matter of like, writing was the safe space where I could go into this creative bubble and like pretend that every crazy thing that was going on in the world was not actually happening for just a short time. And also just out of necessity, because with my husband being furloughed for a bit, it was suddenly the pressures on that I've got to be able to like produce content to make sure that we're going to be able to pay the bills. So it was a little bit necessity and coping skills. And I managed to do a lot of proposals for things that are kind of outside my usual scope. So pretty much all of my books are paranormal romance, but I've done some high fantasy stuff, and I did a novella and like a short story, and I've got a YA novel. So those are things that my readers have not seen yet because they're out on submission right now. But yeah, I had some fun time to play around. I indie produced my one of my audiobooks, so that was it was a lot of fun getting to have that extra time, but at the same time it was born out of a not so wonderful situation. So
What about you, Sammy?
I had some other things going on health-wise, so it was a time of whittling things down to the foundation, and starting back over and kind of building everything back up again by what was most important. And that did it.
What about you, Jackie?
Well, so in 2019, we sent our youngest off to college. And I started a plan to leave my day job and stay home to write. It was a very long process that was planned out, that involved going to part-time for 6 months, turning over all of my duties at work, and then, leaving to stay at home. And I had all of these grand plans for what being a full-time author and being at home was going to be like. And I went full-time January 2020. And none of my awesome plans of, going to write at the coffee shop every day. And, you know, all of the things that I had planned, you know, obviously did not happen. And I am like the least introverted person you're ever going to meet. And so I left a job that surrounded me constantly with people with a plan for how I was going to deal with that, being an at-home person that totally just got blown out of the water. So it was a very unusual year for me because I've been at home. Like in my whole life, I've never been at home ever. So it's been very, very different. But I got a lot of writing done. I mean, how's that? I don't remember how many books I put out, but I put out more than I'd planned because, you know, what else am I going to do all day? I don't know. I guess I could watch Midsummer Murder all day long, every day, probably, but that wouldn't be productive. So that was pretty much my whole year. I just wrote a lot of books and watched a lot of television.
Yeah, I think that was the year for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what's the one fun thing we haven't talked about with you guys' books? The one thing that you look at and that we haven't dove into that you want to share to bring the readers into the newest releases? So Michael, I'll pick back up and just start with you again.
I'm going to stick with Guns of Underhill on this one because we've already talked about my Frankenstein corner in Blood Phoenix. And that is that actually two minor things. One, that Wells is back. 6 or 8 gun Wells, the gunslinging pixie, is back in the second book, and he's threading the stories together. Maybe more important for the readers is that we've actually reformatted the series because of their comments. So now one of the other characters that was the semi-major character in the first book is actually going to be the star of book 3. So they're actually getting what they want. And they wanted it. It worked for me. It worked for the plot. I was like, great. You know what? You're right. She turned out to be a great character. Let's do it.
What about you, Kate?
So I've talked a lot about the hero Maverick being the Packmaster, but I haven't talked much about the heroine Sierra, and I feel like she was really fun as a character to write, and also just she fits the fierce title in Fierce Cowboy Wolf probably more than Maverick does, because she's trying to become the first female elite warrior within the pack. And I mean, as any woman on the panel knows, like, there's glass ceilings when it comes to being a woman and trying to be the first in a field to do something. And so I had a lot of fun, I guess, kind of smashing the patriarchy in this book. So there's a lot of fun to be had in seeing this strong female heroine kind of triumph at the end of this book, and also take the alpha pack master of this pack down a peg.
What about you, Sammy?
So what I'm really good at is found family, chosen family. That's my jam. I love it. And I have 2 characters. They run they're a married couple, 2 women, and they run the Omega House, and they are fun, and they are not telling everybody everything that they know about everything, and they are going to be a blast to follow through the series. But they're
Oh, we lost you. We lost you for a minute, Sammy. Oh.
Come back. There you are.
Hey, Sammy, we lost you for a minute.
I'm back.
Okay. Yeah, we lost you through part of that.
I don't know where you lost me.
You
They
were
had
saying
the
that
house.
they were in charge
The
of the
house.
Omega House, and they were a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. You know, they're creating a family. That's how I ended it. They're creating a real family there.
Excellent. What about you, Jackie?
I had to mute myself because my birds like Kate's voice. Every time she talks, they get loud. So Sammi stole my answer, and you should have gone to me first, so I could have been the first one to say it. The best thing I think about this, that what I'm loving about writing this series, is that I really am forming a chosen family with the boys in this series, and I'm having a lot of fun with that, because the character Brennan in this book, he's living in a new town. He had finished school, and the life he had planned fell apart, and so he moved to Austin, and he didn't have any people. He didn't know anybody, and he had issues with his family, and he is surrounding himself with a family of his own choosing. And I think anybody who's read my books knows that's always a theme in what I write. It's what I love. I love chosen family. And so I'm really having fun creating that with this series.
What about you, Shane?
I just want to say that I think chosen family is the most important trope in gay romance. Yeah. I also write it because I think it's the most honest trope in gay romance. I always appreciate that answer. I think that for me, it's about identity. Identity is always been one of those things that I find so fascinating about a human, and what makes us who we are, because identity it is an ever shifting, thing, right? Like who we are now isn't who we are going to be tomorrow. And I this year really thought a lot about identity and transgender identity, especially because of a couple of friends of mine that kind of made me think about it in a kind of a new way from what they were going through in their lives at the moment. And so, I think that I love all the books that I wrote this year, but I think the YA book that I wrote this year is probably the most important book that I've ever written. And it's just about a high school group of kids putting on a production of Gypsy. But I think that identity is incredible. It's one of those things that, like found family, it drives life forward in terms of who we are and who we surround ourselves with. So I don't even know what the question was anymore, Jim. I effing don't know, but that's my answer.
All right, 1.5 style points.
Okay,
so anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming to hang out with us this evening. It's been a lot of fun. I think parts of it have been pretty deep. So let's just go around one more time and make sure everybody knows where to find you on the good social media, websites, all that kind of fun stuff. We'll work in backwards order this time because, well, why not? Shane, I'm going to let you go first.
Pretty much Shane Morton author will get you, I think, everything on me, I believe. But mainly I can be found in my readers group on Facebook, which is called Shane's Sweet and Salty Readers.
What about you, Jackie?
You can find me on my webpage, which is JackiJames.com. I'm pretty much Jacki James everywhere. That's Jackie with just an I, no E. And I have a Facebook group called Jackie's Rule Breakers. That is a name that goes back to my first series, which was the Rules series. And it's a pretty great group. I like my group. So if you want to connect, feel free to join me there.
What about you, Sammi?
Sammi Cee. You can find me everywhere with Sammi Cee. My website, sammicee.com. But Sammi Sanctuary, my Facebook group, like Jacki James said, it's a lot of fun. I love my Facebook group. I love spending time in there. So it's Sammi Sanctuary.
Kate?
Readers can find me at my website at www.kaitballanger.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm on most social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but these days I really hang out on TikTok a lot. So find me on TikTok at Kait Ballanger. And
Michael.
You can get all of my various contact points at deliriousscribbles.com, especially my new Discord server where we're all kind of hanging out. But after 2 decades of trying, I finally own michaeljallen.com. So eventually that will also work.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight. I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, and of course here at continualconvention.com. I'm on Facebook. I occasionally show up in the hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter and Instagram and all the other fun places too. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out with us, and we will see you next time. And everybody's got a bunch of books to go buy and read.